Papers to be laid.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 22 of 2018, Legal Profession Eligibility, Jillian Milani Prevost, Order. Statutory Instrument Number 23 of 2018, Legal Professional Eligibility, Sherilyn Lavina Christopher, Order. Statutory Instrument Number 24 of 2018, Free Zone Designation of Free Zone, Order. Statute Instrument Number 25 of 2018, Invest Saint Lucia Shock Castries Vesting Order. Statutory Instrument Number 26 of 2018, Fiscal Incentives Caribbean Quality Meats Limited Order. And Statutory Instrument Number 27 of 2018, Citizenship by Investment Revocation Order.
Bills. Honourable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs and the Public Service.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for the first reading a bill shortly entitled Appropriation 2018-2019.
Appropriation 2018-2019.
Honourable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation and External Affairs and the Public Service.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Orders 48-2 to enable this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Honourable members, the question is that Standing Order number 48-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honourable Prime Minister to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable Member for Mekong North.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 32-9 to enable the Honourable Prime Minister to uninterruptedly introduce the appropriation bill for second reading.
Honourable members, the question is that Standing Order number 42-9 be suspended to enable the Honourable Prime Minister to uninterruptedly introduce the Appropriation 2018-2019 bill for second reading. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move for a second reading of a bill shortly entitled The Appropriations 2018-2019. Mr. Speaker, it is once again a special privilege for me to present to this Honourable House and to the people of St. Lucia the government's policy statement on the budget for 2018-2019. Firstly, I'd like to thank God for his blessings, my wife and my family, and my constituency for their unwavering support. Permit me, Mr. Speaker, to take some time to express on behalf of this Honourable House and also on behalf of the entire nation our deep sorrow for the devastating loss of our Folk Research Centre due to a fire on March 25th, 2018. The FRC was and is our national repository for our rich heritage and culture. I wish to pledge the support and commitment of my government to assist the FRC in its restoration efforts. As a people, we should all commit as we rebuild from the ashes. Mr. Speaker, toward the conclusion of our last sitting, I referenced the thousands of St. Lucians who on June 6, 2016, freely chose to place the United Workers' Party in the office under my leadership. They did so because they had placed their faith in the promises my party made them. We admit some of the pledges we made will be more difficult to achieve than others because there are very few quick fixes. But we are not deterred. We are determined to deliver on all our election pledges, regardless of impediments deliberately put in our way. One of the promises we made in election time, Mr. Speaker, was to introduce to government affairs real transparency and accountability. Previous administrations may have made similar promises, but after 15 years it became quite clear that their promises were just words, words and more words, empty words. Mr. Speaker, shortly after the June 6 general elections, I promised St. Lucians that governance under my stewardship would no longer be business as usual, that our country was sick and dying of business as usual, that we would put an end to business as usual or die trying. It is also true that you cannot get a broken vehicle moving again until you have discovered precisely why it stalled in the first place. A doctor cannot usefully prescribe for a sick patient until he has thoroughly examined that patient. Random remedies, like random government policies, are doomed to deliver unpredictable consequences from which often there is no return. As I say, Mr. Speaker, at the conclusion of our last sitting, I repeated my party's election pledge to get to the bottom of a number of suspicious undertakings by our predecessors, undertakings that were neither transparent nor accounted for. It appeared in some cases that deliberate attempts were made to cover tracks and make investigation pointless. We blocked an escape route in April of 2017, Mr. Speaker, when we amended the Crown Proceedings Act on the recommendation of the 2009 Ramshahoy Commission. The amendment now allows for the recovery of public funds, unencumbered by statute of limitations. Perhaps coincidentally, Mr. Speaker, at the time of the amendment, members of the other side chose to absent themselves from the House. But the amendment to the Crown Proceedings Act was only the beginning, Mr. Speaker. There is still a lot of blinding smoke to be cleared from around a number of public concerns, including how we became embroiled in the material affairs of the Saudi billionaire, and what induced a former Prime Minister to partner with an American oil speculator notorious for his business practices. We must clear that suffocating smoke that conceals the truth about Messrs. Wada Jafali, Jack Greinberg, Robert Lindquist, St. Jude Hospital, and the infamous minister's account. And now, Mr. Speaker, I'll report on our progress as a government since our first budget last year, which honourable members will recall was crafted as a foundation for setting St. Lucia on a new path of sustainable economic growth for the social advancement of our people. This, Mr. Speaker, is at the core of what good, responsible governance is about. It's not simply about attracting investment, building roads, schools, hospitals, police stations, or providing jobs. Those are merely the tools, the means to an end for improving the lives of all St. Lucians. What this policy statement will do, therefore, is to lay bare the areas that this United Workers' Party government has identified as the next steps towards the ultimate goal of poverty eradication and shared prosperity among our people. Mr. Speaker, when the people of St. Lucia elected United Workers' Party to government almost 2 years ago, we were faced with a country in crisis. There was high debt, low growth, high unemployment. The country was overtaxed, and there was a loss of confidence by investors and by our own private sector, and indeed by the people of Saint Lucia. To all intents and purposes, the economy had stagnated. We knew that we would have to be bold and innovative if we were going to turn things around. Mr. Speaker, we had a vision and we had a plan, and we have stuck to it in the face of doubt and criticism. Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, and I quote, "The only limit of our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today." I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that this government is focused on the realization of tomorrow. We knew that we had to jumpstart the economy to achieve the realization of tomorrow. So that when we reduced the VAT in the first budget, it was not merely to fulfill an election promise. We had confidence in the people and the businesses of Saint Lucia that we would create the economic activity that was required to get us back on track. They did better than even we expected. Despite all the carping and the criticism about the loss of revenue, where we were projected to lose $55 million, the outturn for the VAT is estimated to be a shortfall of $27 million. More than this, though, Mr. Speaker, we made the conscious decision to restructure the tax burden. The consequence is that the tax on fuel and its deployment to road maintenance and repairs has directly benefited those who pay the tax. Similarly, with the airport tax, the people who use the airport will benefit from improved facilities. The taxes are therefore more targeted. Mr. Speaker, we've taken the first step by creating economic activity and growing the economy. Unemployment and underemployment have fallen, and we've established a platform on which to build. Investor and business confidence has returned, and we must now be ready to capitalize on it. Mr. Speaker, the short-term measures we have taken to boost the economy have been supported by our longer-term plan to restructure and reposition the economy so as to place it in a higher growth trajectory. In this regard, we have commenced the process of re-engineering government, as we believe that a more efficient and responsive government is required for the delivery of improved services to the citizens and growth in the private sector. Mr. Speaker, we all know that the government's ability to engage in long-term planning has been extremely weak, and this has been a major cause of our somewhat dysfunctional development. It is for this reason we have created the National Integrated Program Planning, NIP unit. The NIP will be responsible for engineering in the long-term development of the country and thus allow for a more orderly and structured approach to the development of our island. As a broader geographic level, we are at an advanced stage of developing master plans for Vieux Fort and for the redevelopment of Castries, and very soon Soufriere, Gros Islet, and Rodney Bay. This budget is therefore premised on the need to facilitate and indeed drive further growth. Before I get into our strategies for the budget cycle, Mr. Speaker, it is worth recalling that last year identified 6 key areas in which the government would focus over the next 4 years. 1 was creating sustainable employment. 2 was re-engineering social services. 3 was reforming government. 4 was improving security and justice. 5 was building capacity in renewable energy. And 6 was adapting to climate change. I wish now to give a brief update on the progress in these areas during year 1. I'm encouraged that the employment rate has declined. Even though we are by no means satisfied with the numbers, we have achieved success in providing more jobs. From a peak of 24.4% in 2014, unemployment dropped to 21.3% by the end of 2016, and declined a further to 20.2% in 2017. Youth unemployment remains a stubborn challenge at 38.5%. But we are going to take steps in this financial year to launch a major assault on creating new jobs for our young people. I am heartened, however, by a sharp decline in underemployment as a share of the labor force from 9.6% to 5.3%. This provides a promising sign that more people are finding more sustainable work and earning more money. Mr. Speaker, in my address last year, I articulated a vision for our social protection system that would target those most in need. It would provide a range of support interventions, both cash and non-cash. It would be household-centered and, above all, confer clear responsibilities not only to the state, but to the recipients themselves. Having reviewed the system, our efforts this year will be concentrated on establishing the appropriate infrastructure for this social protection system. It will establish and track who the vulnerable are, the range and support needed and provided, and their overall status and progress. The appropriate software to capture data on the above areas has been identified. With such information, we will now be better placed to overhaul our current system of social services with one that is information-based, administered at the local level, and better equipped to articulately quantify the resources required to assist the vulnerable and those most in need. We can no longer continue to subsidize all sections of society under the guise of protecting the poor. This is simply unsustainable. There is no doubt that an agile and responsive public service can make a significant contribution to economic growth and national development. In this information age, the transformation of the bureaucracy to meet expectations of the business community and all solutions remains a challenge and an imperative and an important goal of my government. We've made progress in the following areas during last year. An assessment of e-government initiatives has been completed and services have been prioritized for entry to the shared services platform based on their impact on government businesses. The digitization of government records has been ongoing for some time now and will continue. In order to complement government's e-commerce strategy and to reduce the digital divide between the rural and urban areas, as promised in our manifesto, I'm especially proud, Mr. Speaker, to report that the installation of the wireless internet backbone for the government island-wide network, or GNet, will be completed by mid-April, with the assistance of the government of the Republic of China, Taiwan. Phase 2 of the project will allow schools, communities, government facilities, and the general public in Castries, Micoud, Vieux-Fort North, Canneries, and Dennery to be connected at low or no cost. This will provide access to the internet to young and old alike and help to improve overall productivity. There are also huge advantages to be realized by children from underprivileged homes who may not have previously had easy access to educational tools and resources available online. Considering planning has been undertaken to improve the delivery of justice and policing services over the past year, our initiatives to finance new infrastructure for the judiciary and police are in the final stages of completion. And a police force has undertaken a comprehensive review of its operations and has presented concrete operational and social programs to reduce crime in Saint Lucia. I will elaborate on these a little later in my presentation. But at this point, let me go off cue for a second and to congratulate the Saint Lucia Police Force, the champions of the Regional Police T20 tournament. And more specifically, let me allow to congratulate Mr. Chevron Charles, who was made player of the match. In the interim, the police force has been provided with a fleet of 15 new vehicles and 6 motorcycles, and the forensic lab was reopened to help improve investigative capacity. There have been important gains in the renewable energy sector over the past year. I will highlight a couple of them here. In its bid to increase the uptake of solar photovoltaic systems, the National Utility Regulatory Commission published a procedure for connecting solar photovoltaic systems to the national electricity grid. This has simplified the application process with a resulting increase of 149 kilowatts of electricity generated from the sun. We look forward to even more commercial properties and homeowners continue to invest in PV systems in the coming year. Meanwhile, development of the geothermal resources continues apace. In this regard, I am pleased to report the following developments. The pre-feasibility study for the geothermal project was completed in December of 2017. The draft environmental and social impact assessment report for the drilling sites was submitted in January of 2018. Work on the legislative and regulatory framework for introducing and integrating geothermal energy in the domestic power system is ongoing. Preparation for a power purchase agreement between the geothermal developer, LUSLEC, and the Geothermal Resource Development Agreement between government and the geothermal developer is also ongoing. In the area of climate change, Mr. Speaker, we are a small island developing state with limited natural resources. And we must all contribute to the sustainability of our Helen of the West. The development and the resilience of the country cannot be successful without the participation of its citizens. Therefore, the planning process for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals has so far been an inclusive one, which has embraced all sectors of society. The effects of climate change and its mitigation must be made real to St. Lucians beyond the horrific images of hurricane-ravaged Barbuda, Dominica, and Tortola that we saw last year. In an effort to bring mitigation closer to home, a pilot financing mechanism has been introduced to promote increased climate resilience under a Climate Adaptation Finance Facility, or CAF. Mr. Speaker, tremendous efforts was invested last year in lobbying our bilateral donors and multilateral agencies on the criteria for official development assistance, ODA, with the aim of creating the path to access critically required resources for building resilience in small states. It was an onerous task, and we have registered some success in getting the international community to stop and pay attention. Our efforts were focused on removing the simplistic criteria of GDP per capita as the qualifying factor to be eligible for the ODA funding. In addition, procedures to access ODA funding in times of emergency require fundamental changes to allow for immediate access to these resources. Mr. Speaker, debt management strategies have also come under sharp focus by the multilateral agencies. It was important that we spoke collectively and that we continue to act in unison as small island states on this matter. It would be remiss of me, Mr. Speaker, if I did not take the opportunity to recognize the contribution of the OECS Commission, in particular that of the Director General, Dr. Didicus Jules, for his sterling leadership during the 2017 catastrophic weather events. In addition, the government of Mexico, the President Emmanuel Macron of France for his One Planet initiative, the UK government and the government of Canada in highlighting the urgent needs of small island developing states for climate change developing funding. I wish to thank them all for their various efforts and assistance so far in helping the SIDS and us to help ourselves. Mr. Speaker, before I move to the strategic policies of the budget of 2018-2019 fiscal year, it is important to set the context of the economic environment in which we operate as a sovereign state. Most economies in today's world are either connected or impacted by what happens in economies of the main trading partners. Saint Lucia is no different in this regard. In the most recent World Economic Outlook issued just a few days ago, the International Monetary Fund has revised its forecast for global growth upwards to 3.9% for 2018 and for 2019. This is welcome news for us here in Saint Lucia. The growth momentum in our major source markets and trading partners in the US and Europe are expected to have beneficial spillover effects on our own economy. The euro area is expected to grow by 2.2% in 2018, while the cut in corporate taxes in the United States is expected to have a positive impact on the economy, with growth accelerating to 2.7% in 2018. This bodes well, Mr. Speaker, for St. Lucia's growth prospects. The U.S. remains St. Lucia's largest source of both stayover and cruise arrivals. It is imperative, Mr. Speaker, that we position ourselves to take advantage of this global economic expansion and put the necessary systems in place to capitalize on the spin-off opportunities that will arise. Of critical importance is our ability as a country to work assiduously and urgently to remove the barriers to growth that are within our own control. In our own region, growth was mixed, but generally continues to lag behind other small developing economies, which is worrying. Guyana experienced a growth of 3.5% due largely to an increase in gold production. Trinidad and Tobago continues to be hampered by low energy prices and reduced output, resulting in a negative growth of minus 3.2%. Barbados is still grappling with a high debt to GDP ratio of over 100% and saw a downward revision of growth from 1% to 0.9% in 2017. High debt and fiscal imbalances continue to strangle economic growth in many of our sister economies. The fury of Hurricanes Irma and Maria was a stark reminder of the importance of building resilience in our economies, not only to recover from natural disasters and bolster the effects of climate change, but to mitigate against the dangers of prolonged weak competitiveness, high fiscal deficits, and inadequate human development. The impact of such events further manifests in increased insurance premiums and constraints to access insurance payouts. This has implications for the pace of the recovery and the restructuring efforts, as well as our continued competitiveness. Here at home, preliminary figures for 2017 indicate that the economy has started to grow again by the notable margin of 2.5%. However, I wish to repeat, it is imperative that we remove the impediments to further growth. If we do not accommodate growth through investment, it will be temporary, unreliable, and therefore unsustainable. Our growth over the last year was driven largely by a strong recovery in the tourism sector and also reflected increased activity in construction, wholesale and retail and manufacturing sectors with positive spin-offs on other sectors. Overall, growth was tempered by a decline in output from the agriculture sector, which was affected by the passage of Tropical Storm Matthew late in 2016. Mr. Speaker, before I examine the outlook for the year ahead, I wish to identify 3 areas of our financial sector that require reform. This sector underpins every area of economic activity in our country. It affects the degree to which the business sector can invest and fund daily operations, while for consumers, the sector facilitates consumption and savings. Without consumption and investment, economic activity comes to a halt. It is important to note, Mr. Speaker, that our commercial financial sector witnessed one of the largest expansions in credit in the ECCU prior to the 2008-2009 global crisis, and conversely, had one of the largest contractions. Slow recovery to this sector, partly due to delayed legislative reforms, has impeded financial intermediation, although the credit union sector has taken up some of the slack. Mindful of these hindrances, the government is committed to fast-track reforms to improve the environment with which financial institutions operate, with a focus on the following interventions. Mr. Speaker, access to credit is a perennial issue within the Saint Lucia business landscape. Upon closer study, the issues surrounding the lack of suitable collateral play a central role in determining access to finance. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to inform this Honourable House that the Government of Saint Lucia is working with the World Bank to allow for more movable assets, such as accounts receivable of a company in its inventory and equipment, to serve as collateral and therefore enable businesses to use these non-traditional assets as security for loans to generate new productive capital. This, Mr. Speaker, will be particularly beneficial to small and medium-sized businesses and other borrowers with characteristics that may fall outside the bank's typical collateral definition, i.e. land or cash. During 2017 and 2018, Mr. Speaker, the government was able to draft legislation that would allow for the use of movable assets and undertook an assessment of the registry of the High Court as a possible host for online registry that we set up for the registration of the securities. Reforming of the existing framework surrounding insolvency. Mr. Speaker, 2015 report by the World Bank highlighted that the current legal framework for insolvency and restructuring and other aspects of the credit-debitor relationship is outdated in Saint Lucia. It noted that there are multiple laws that apply, with often overlapping and inconsistent provisions, and that creditors' recovery is difficult both within and outside insolvency. This is contributing to increased levels of non-performing loans and impeding the channeling of resources to viable enterprises. Mr. Speaker, cognizant of the deficiencies in the existing framework, it is the intention of the government to ensure that businesses in financial distress are rescued where possible and that a personal bankruptcy regime is introduced that provides a second chance for debtors. The evidence suggests that addressing these deficiencies will encourage entrepreneurship, which is a key focus of the government. During fiscal year 2017-2018, the government was able to undertake various consultations on the draft legislation, as well as the drafting of accompanying regulations, and work will continue to finalize the policy and the draft legislation. Reforming the existing framework surrounding foreclosure. Mr. Speaker, the issue of foreclosure has long been a vexing problem in our country, fraught with the many issues surrounding insolvency, outdated legislation, and a lack of will to press for change. Change must come, however, if as a country we are to have access to financing for viable projects that is currently tied up in non-performing loans. As a consequence, we are in consultation with all parties and the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank to determine the best way forward, and I will update the House at a later date. Mr. Speaker, barring any natural disasters and building on the momentum of the tourism and construction sectors, I anticipate continued growth in 2018. We've seen renewed investor, business, and consumer confidence in St. Lucia's economy. Several foreign direct investment projects are in the pipeline, and an advanced stage are expected to come on stream in 2018. Construction and the tourism sectors are expected to expand within the commencement and continuation of the following projects. The Fairmont in Choiseul is expected to commence in the second quarter of 2018. Marriott Courtyard at Point Seraphim, Sandals La Source and the Greg Norman Golf Course, Bay Gardens Residences, Dreams and Secrets in Canals, Ritz-Carlton project, and a continued development of the Pearl of the Caribbean project. In spite of these positive developments, Mr. Speaker, a number of factors are limiting our growth potential. And as I said at the beginning of my address to this Honourable Chamber, the foundation for growth has been laid. It is now time to take the next steps in building a new resilient St. Lucia. During this budget cycle, we will therefore concentrate on investing in our people, upgrading our physical infrastructure, improving public sector efficiency, and managing the cost of our debt. These four planks, Mr. Speaker, will be critical in positioning St. Lucia and St. Lucians to maximize our growth potential and the benefits to be derived therefrom. Underpinning our growth strategy will be the need to build resilience in whatever we do. Resilience is an important component in making our growth sustainable, which in turn will enable us to finance our social assistance programs for the vulnerable among us, provide opportunities for all St. Lucians to improve their quality of life, and allow us to face the challenges of climate change with greater confidence. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to start with the requirement to invest in our people, for it is St. Lucians that lie at the very heart of our endeavors as a government. Every St. Lucian has the right to expect a standard of living that will allow him or her to raise a family, educate their children, live in a comfortable home, and access to affordable health care, and create wealth for their next generation. These are basic human expectations. As a government, our duty is to provide our citizens with an education that will equip them to seize the opportunities that are available in growing economy, provide access to quality health care and housing, foster innovation and entrepreneurship, and to provide a social safety net for the vulnerable. These are the things we are committed to, Mr. Speaker. under the era of education. Let us therefore examine how we will train and educate our people for the jobs of the future. It is not an open secret, or it is an open secret, that our education system has over time fallen short of providing our young people with the skills necessary to succeed in a rapidly changing world. When we came into office 2 years ago, we found an alarming state of decay in most of our school buildings and a moribund curriculum unsuited to the demands of the service economy. We have set about to correct these deficiencies in several ways. First, we recognize that skills mismatch is a real danger to both human and economic development in a small open economy like Saint Lucia. It is therefore imperative that we modernize our approach to teaching and learning. Both our teachers and our students must be technological compliant, adaptable, and ready for the opportunities of the 21st century demands this of them. In this regard, curriculum development and the use of technology appropriate for teaching and learning will be high on the education agenda in the coming fiscal year and beyond. The GNET initiative will facilitate the integration of technology into the classroom and therefore will be an investment in and the realization of an existing school plan to maximize this new thrust in digital learning. The start of the new school year in September will see the establishment of 2 centers of excellence in what were previously considered leisure or part-time activities, but in today's world can be the basis for lucrative careers. The Center of Excellence for Sports will be located in the Groselet Secondary School, and the Center for Excellence for the Creative Arts and Culture will be housed at the Angers Secondary School. Both centers will start with select programs in their respective disciplines and ramp up to full strength over the next 3 years. Our young people will be given every opportunity to use their God-given talents to excel outside of and within traditional academic pursuits. Mr. Speaker, one of the reasons that China is now a market leader in the manufacture of technology components is early recognition of the value of technical and vocational training. While the Western world was focused on the value of a university education, China was training young people for opportunities of the future. The lesson to be learned is that we must prepare our people for jobs that we know will become available over the next few years. Hence, the Ministry of Education is embarking on a new thrust of TVET and CVQ certification in hospitality studies, culinary arts, spa and wellness, investment services, and construction techniques. When we speak of resilience in our people, we're mindful that we must foster a culture of lifelong learning. It is the only way that we'll be able to keep up with the rapid-fire changes in technology that drive almost every aspect of our daily lives. The rationalization of the school plan will be undertaken in earnest. Following on this, empty school buildings will be repurposed as business incubators to encourage entrepreneurship and innovation in the surrounding communities. The overarching education policy, aptly named EQUIP, has the following short and medium-term targets: improving the relevance and the quality of instruction across the system, enhancing special needs education, rationalization and repair of the school plan to make it learning and technical friendly, teacher training and professional development. The claim that the revenue from EQUIP this year, the revenue for EQUIP this year is $2 million. The National Apprenticeship Program. We also recognize, Mr. Speaker, the urgent need to capture the young people not long out of school or about to leave school. With the millions of dollars that will be invested over the next few years in hotel, plant, and other national infrastructure, the government is committed to ensuring that our young people will benefit from the jobs that will come from these investments. We will therefore redouble our efforts to expand the National Apprenticeship Program to train our young people in areas that will provide immediate or near-term opportunities. We've already facilitated the establishment of Ojo Labs in Vieux Fort, where 53 young people are currently employed in the new technology field of artificial intelligence. The aim is to increase that number to over 200 this financial year. We should be proud that we are among the first countries, if not the first in the region, to enter this industry. All reports reaching me are of the excitement and the gratitude of the young people employed at Ojo Labs so far. We're also going to introduce short-term training programs in hospitality and construction so that our people are ready to be employed with the projects in tourism and construction as they come on stream. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, since we've identified tourism as our main economic driver, we must develop, either in partnership with the private sector or as a totally private sector enterprise, a program where our young people can study culinary arts, hospitality services, back-of-the-house operations, and tour operations. We have to get serious about supporting the tourism industry and providing opportunities for our young people to have a decent paying careers. Refocusing of our education policies and training programs are designed to have a positive impact on youth employment, and I look forward to reporting the results to the country over the course of the next year as the intended changes come into being, as jobs start to become available. Mr. Speaker, my administration is firm in its view that the empowerment of our young people is pivotal to building of the resilience of our country. Let me repeat that. My administration is firm in its view that the empowerment of our young people is pivotal to the building of resilience in our country. They have a central role to play as an agent of change in building of a new Saint Lucia. It is a role they must assume now, not somewhere in the distant future, and it's not somewhere in the distant future, and we, as the current leaders, as the adults, must not only embrace this philosophy, but initiate concrete actions to foster and nurture a climate of inclusion and empowerment. We must develop a mindset of service excellence. We must nurture an innate mentality of service to community and to country. We must evoke in all of us an attitude that expresses care and concern for those who are vulnerable and less fortunate by being our neighbor's keeper, friend, and confidant. Along with other strategies, we will introduce a national youth service program, which I hope can be finalized within this fiscal year. Building social resilience. Furthermore, building resilience must be designed to expand the capacities of our people and their representative organizations, not just to cope with, but overcome all types of adversities. The more resilient we are as individuals, as families, as communities, and as one nation, the better prepared we will be to transform our society into one which converts crisis into opportunities. Mr. Speaker, this focus of social resilience will not be limited to our youth alone, but will embrace the most vulnerable and marginalized in our society. For as the old adage says, you're only as strong as your weakest link. Mr. Speaker, let me begin with arguably the most vulnerable group in our society, our children. As we embark on our journey of building a new Saint Lucia, it is clear that our current child protection system is not only inadequate but inconsistent with our global commitments. The legislative reform has been slow in coming. We've had several limitations at the service and program level that undermine the administration of our child protection services, and we are still, unfortunately, in the punitive mode of operation, as distinct from a rehabilitation approach that is integral to our resilience thrust. Mr. Speaker, the time for initiating action is now. In addition to the legislative reforms associated with the passing of the Family Laws Bill alluded to in the throne speech, my administration is committed to addressing some of the structural limitations associated with the administration of child protection services in Saint Lucia. The Division of Social Services is currently staffed with 11, let me repeat, 11 family case workers, 2 of whom are assigned specifically to foster care and adoption, leaving just 9 officers for all the remaining child protection cases and responsibilities. The manifestation of such a scenario are there for all to see. In this fiscal year, we will begin the process of tackling this deficiency by initially adding 3 more officers to the staff complement. we recognize that this does not address the optimal staff complement for the division, but over the course of the year, we intend to review this situation and, if feasible, continue to augment the cadre of staff. But in the meanwhile, my gratitude goes out to those 11 workers. I also wish to signal the intent of my administration to embark on a similar course of action in respect of all of the other institutions engaged in the delivery of child protection services in this country, inclusive of the probation services, family court, welfare services, as well as agencies such as Transit Home and Boys Training Center. Mr. Speaker, we owe it to those dedicated officers who toil under immense and trying circumstances. But most of all, we owe to the thousands of children in need of a good start in their life journey. It is imperative that they become resilient and productive members of our society. Mr. Speaker, if we accept, as my administration does, that sport is a critical vehicle for building the fabric of our nation, then we must equally accept this medium must be utilized in a more strategic and structured manner. Nowhere is this lack of cohesion more evident than in our sports infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, over decades we've accumulated over 160 sports facilities on this island. That equates to one facility for every 1.5 square miles of land. Such a ratio makes a myriad of issues such as low levels of utilization, limited to little maintenance provision, and limited to little management capacity. It is for this reason that we have undertaken a comprehensive review of our sports infrastructure to formulate an action plan which hopefully over the next 10 years will produce a more focused approach to the development, upgrade, rationalization, and management of our sports facilities. This year, our efforts will focus on transforming the Soufrière Mini Stadium into a national facility that will accommodate FIFA-sanctioned international football, as well as IAF-sanctioned track and field events. We will also establish facilities as part of the community hubs within our wider community settings, like Dennery South, and smaller ones like in Deriso, and a major one in Micoud North. As an administration, however, we know infrastructure in of itself will not equate to maximizing the benefits of sports. Building capacity, increasing coaching, and providing more avenues for competition will be pivotal in achieving this objective. This will become the focus of the collaboration that will be established between the Department of Sports and the National Lotteries Authority. Our youth development agenda will be further complemented by the empowerment programs supported by the CDB and USAID. These interventions will collectively focus on support young people in their wider regions of Castries, Dennery, Ancillary, Soufrière, and Vieux-Fort. The first component will identify the nature and the scale of the youth at risk within those communities. The second relates to the design and implementation of interventions and support programs based on the assessed levels of risk. Moreover, it places young people at the heart in the process of articulating their risk and vulnerabilities, as well as the solutions. Mr. Speaker, at the local level, we must ensure that whatever institutional legislative framework we create is one that is practical and steeped in the confidence that our people are capable and ready to manage their own affairs. Local government reform cannot and should not be automatically associated to elections. Of what purpose are elections if we have not nurtured the leadership and the capacity and the experience is actually working and delivering on the ground? We cannot espouse governments at the local level if our institutions cannot affect change through their own efforts. Of what use is a collection of cemetery dues or any other revenue collecting activity in any jurisdiction that the local authority is unable to utilize these resources for the direct benefit of their own constituency. Why should a council have to revert to central government for every single transaction, service, or product it requires? We cannot continue to frustrate and stifle local initiative, creativity, ideas, and effort. Our focus must be on providing the management and the training and support along with procedural and legislative measures to allow them to get on with the job. If we want to build resilience in our community level, we must confront these challenges head on. And this is precisely what my administration will be doing with the allocation of $1.4 million towards local government community projects. It is a small but significant step in the overall message that must be communicated to our nation as a whole. And I quote, "We welcome your ideas, your input, your participation in the decision-making and implementation process, but you must recognize your responsibility to comply with established procedures and protocols and allow yourself to be subjected to the broader scrutiny to ensure compliance." In the area of health, in terms of investment in our people, Mr. Speaker, healthcare is a universal concern that touches every Saint Lucian at some point in their lives. What is it that we most desire as individuals when faced with ill health or a traumatic injury? Every Saint Lucian wants to know that they have access to high quality care and that they can afford it. It's not a complicated issue, Mr. Speaker. The members of this government are firm in our belief that health care must be made available and affordable to all segments of the population, regardless of social standing or economic circumstances. I therefore want to start with the clear understanding that there needs to be a new approach to how health services are financed in our country. With healthcare costs skyrocketing, in tandem with the expectations of our people for first world medical care, we must find a sustainable way to finance these costs. My government is the view that a universal national health insurance scheme is the best way forward, and we are currently receiving technical assistance from Pan American Health Organization and the European Union in this regard. It is envisioned that both employers and employees will make mandatory contributions in much the same way they do with the national insurance scheme. I realize that the proposed changes to the way we finance health may result in some apprehension, but if we want as a people to have access to the very best health care we can afford as a country, then we must be accepting of change and resolute in our pursuit of excellence. In fact, Mr. Speaker, as a responsible government, we are duty-bound to provide the best health care we can for our citizens at the most affordable cost. And this is what we are setting out to achieve. We could have raised taxes to improve the quality of health care, but it still would not benefit those who could not afford it. We believe that the best option is to implement a national health insurance scheme that neither favors nor discriminates against any Saint Lucian. On receipt of the technical advice and after consultation with the healthcare professionals, we hope to be in a position to institute the health insurance before the end of the fiscal year. I also wish to give the honourable members the assurance that the transition of the Victoria Hospital to OKU Hospital will be completed during this financial year. The dialysis center has already moved into their new accommodation and from all reports functioning well. The radiology department is about to move over and the physiotherapy department has already completed the move. I wish now to turn to St. Jude Hospital. Mr. Speaker, this has been a most vexing, heartbreaking, and painful issue for my government. We've inherited a mess from the former government, and this has placed my government in a dilemma as to it relates to the way forward. There was clearly a lack of planning, no vision for this project. Indeed, this was clearly manifested in the increase in the annual estimated project cost, which the member of Labrie pointed out in his contribution to the debate of budget estimates, where he clearly said himself. that it started off at 36 million, and when they left office, it was at 175 million. It would be tempting to take the easy way out and continue with the construction of St. Jude Hospital. The technical audit, however, outlined a number of deficiencies in the construction of the hospital and estimated that it will cost about 100 million or more to complete the facility. Mr. Speaker, we are now faced with two options on the way forward. The first is to complete the construction of the current St. Jude project with all of its shortcomings, and the second is to build a new hospital, starting from scratch. Whichever option we choose, Mr. Speaker, it will take a minimum of 2 years for completion. This has been one of the most difficult situations that my government has had to deal with. Shortly, my cabinet will be making a decision on this matter, weighing on the pros and cons of both options and ensuring that we make the best decision for the country and for the people of the south of the island. In the meantime, the hospital will have to continue operating from the George Odlum Stadium. We will undertake to repair the roof, plumbing, and other works to keep the staff and the patients as comfortable as we can during the interim. Mr. Speaker, I wish to ask the people of the South for their patience as we seek to deal with this most challenging problem. Investment in infrastructure. It is well understood, Mr. Speaker, that the tired and broken infrastructure is often a major impediment to growth. Targeted investment in national infrastructure is proven to raise productivity, increase economic activity, and at the most basic level, improve the lives of people. St. Lucians know this only too well. The neglect of our road network has led to many wasted hours sitting in traffic and costly repairs to our vehicles. Over the next 4 years, starting in this fiscal year, the government will continue its comprehensive program to rehabilitate our national infrastructure, to increase productivity, guard against extreme weather events, and enhance our competitiveness as a destination for business and tourism. As with our people, building resilience in our physical infrastructure will be critical to our fortunes going forward and will help drive economic growth. Our road network slope stabilization, river desilting, drainage, and riverbank stabilization are all critical components of ensuring the safety of our people, keeping our transportation network open, and improving the movement of people, goods, and services. We will therefore make an investment of approximately 70 million in infrastructural development this year. This will have the added benefit of providing jobs for our contractors, skilled artisans, and construction workers. Additionally, the government of St. Lucia has received a grant of 28.6 million sterling or pounds from the United Kingdom government through its Department of International Development. These funds have been approved for the rehabilitation of the West Coast Road and the Millennium Highway. The designs will incorporate climate resilience elements to better enable them to withstand major climatic events. The Millennium Highway has exceeded its operational life. The cost of maintaining the surface has simply become too expensive. It requires a major rehabilitation if it is to serve its purpose of providing a safe overland link between the north and the south of the island. The government will therefore reconstruct 5.3 kilometers of the highway from Latok roundabout to cul-de-sac. The other component of this project will see the resurfacing of 18 kilometers of the West Coast Road between Roseau and Columbet. Design and procurement will commence this financial year, and construction is expected to start in 2019. The allocation for two components this year is 3.4 million, as construction is expected to start in the last quarter of this financial year. Other road maintenance projects will provide a viable network of bypass roads to use as an alternative to the Castries-Groselet Highway. The aim is to reduce commuter time, improve safety, improve access to agriculture and tourism areas, and support economic activity in the areas served by the Castries-Groselet Highway. In conjunction with improvements to the road network, considerable work has been undertaken and will continue this financial year on improvements to the bridges and slope stabilization. In this regard, the Canaries and Tumazo bridges will be completed as part of the funding provided by the Caribbean Development Bank after the passage of Hurricane Tomas. It is estimated that over 42 million is required for the effective slope management over the next 3 years. During the coming year, the government has allocated over $12 million in stabilization mitigation at Balata, Union, Columbet, Trouvé, Saltibus, Moka, and where contracts for the construction of retaining walls have either been awarded or imminent. In tandem with these hard structures, 29 rivers and ravines across the island have been identified for desilting over a 3-year period at a cost of $7 million. I turn now to the development of the cul-de-sac valley. Honourable members are no doubt aware that this initiative dates back to the 1990s, but has not progressed in any meaningful way for one reason or another. This is about to change. With the assistance of a grant from the Japan International Corporation Agency, the bridge at cul-de-sac will be rebuilt to be more resilient to higher water flows. This will not only ensure that the link to the airport is maintained in the event of bad weather, but along with other flood mitigation efforts, will open the possibility of the development of cul-de-sac to relieve some of the pressure of Castries. Part of the JICA grant will also be used to rebuild the Ravine-Poisson Bridge to ensure alternative access to the south and the southeast. This program will cost EC $46.4 million, of which $14.9 million has been allocated to the construction of these two bridges for 2018-2019, and work is expected to commence by June. The next area of infrastructural investment in the government has identified relates primarily to tourism and, of course, the net effect this will have on jobs for St. Lucians. Our focus will be on both air and seaports. Mr. Speaker, with the number of pipeline projects in the tourism sector, our room stock is expected to increase by approximately 2,000 rooms over the next 3 to 4 years. This is a 50% increase on our present room stock. More than will be expected from the Honourable International Airport. This increased traffic can only be appropriately serviced by increasing HIA's amenities and capacity. The Honourable International Airport will therefore undergo a major expansion to complement and capitalize on the gains expected by renewed marketing efforts of the island as both as a holiday and business destination, greater airlift, and increased hotel room stocks. Redevelopment of HIA will take place in a phased manner using concessional loan financing. We have currently finalizing the loan agreement with the Republic of China of Taiwan for US $100 million that is required. The US $15 million a year in tax will be used as a security against repayment of the loan. This allows the country to benefit from the immediate redevelopment of HIA. The country will acquire a much needed asset, which will be financed through a dedicated revenue stream over time. The works will include the construction of a new terminal building to handle projected tourism growth at a new location closer to the disused runway, which can have synergies with the seaport and new road infrastructure. The air traffic controller tower and a technical block built in the early 70s is in need of modernization. A new tower will therefore be constructed. A runway is approaching the end of its useful life, and the turning bay requires realignment and extension. Given the projected hotel room stock, the airport will be required by October 2020. I turn now to the seaport development, Mr. Speaker. The expansion of the Point Seraphine berth at number 1 has made it possible for the Castries Seaport to berth quantum-class vessels, which can accommodate over 4,900 passengers per visit, compared to the 3,400 passenger vessels we continue to service. Invest Saint Lucia is presently examining options for the overall redevelopment of Point Seraphine duty-free shopping complex and its immediate environs. The goal is to modernize the shopping complex, which was built almost 32 years ago. It is anticipated that the complex will be developed in accordance with the present and future expectations of major cruise ship facility to further enhance the visitor experience and increase visitor spend. Mr. Speaker, Point Seraphine can no longer be a dedicated cruise ship terminal. There is need to diversify its use, and as a consequence, the overall proposed redevelopment will include the construction of a 140-room modern Class A business center and a yachting marina. Geotechnical exploratory works have commenced as a precursor for the overall development and feasibility plan. The redevelopment of Point Seraphine will have a positive impact on the job market during construction and going forward as a new commercial space is open. As part of the redevelopment of the Castries port, the container park will need to be relocated. Investigations are ongoing to the most suitable location. All this will have implications for the urban renewal of the Castries itself. The build-out of the sanitary sewage system will be a priority, and I am advised that technological advances in this industry mean that we can take a modular approach which will significantly reduce the footprint required by the previous processing operations. Feasibility studies on the available options will be undertaken. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we are going to focus on planned development in the South to maximize opportunities for our people and growth in the economy. As we are all aware, the South offers opportunities for rejuvenation and indeed expansion. In this regard, the Pearl of the Caribbean project in Vieux Fort is ongoing. Work is currently underway on the racehorse and in anticipation of the first race in 2019. Site studies and physical planning approvals were underway for the Ile Pirata Vieux Fort known as Site C. This location will be home to the cruise ship home port terminal, duty-free retail, other retail and food and beverage establishments, a hotel and casino, waterfront residences, marina and free zone businesses. Undoubtedly, the cruise port is a major component of the project and will require significant infrastructure work and environmental studies. Land reclamation is also expected to take place according to adding approximately 200 acres to the site. Real opportunities exist in home porting as a complement to the expansion of HIA and its proximity to the Vieux Fort port. And this is an area that we will seek to develop. It will provide opportunities for the agricultural and transportation industries, but it must be carefully planned to avert undue pressure on our road and water networks. Consultations with the stakeholders will take place to alert them to the opportunities that will open up and to hear their ideas and concerns. Village tourism. The Village Tourism Project is both an investment in infrastructure and, more importantly, people. It seeks to give small to medium-sized local investors in local communities the opportunity to share in the tourism pie. It will also augment our tourism product by offering an authentic Saint Lucian experience grounded in eco and heritage tourism. The project has two phases. Phase one is a consultancy to facilitate the establishment of the village tourism entity. This entity will be charged with the responsibility of creating economic opportunities for people interested in investing in their communities. Phase two consists of the establishment of a Village Tourism Incorporated, an organization established to act like a franchise to promote the offering of community tourism products and attractions that build on the natural, cultural, and human capital. Moreover, it will provide support to strengthen the operations of small businesses. Grant funding from the CARICOM Development Fund in the amount of EC $324,000 has been secured to finance the technical assistance on the establishment of the institutional framework and the preparation of a roadmap and business plan for village tourism. Water resources. As developments in tourism and housing increase, we must be able to provide an adequate supply of water to support them, along with the existing need for safe, reliable water supply. This brings me to the management of our water resources. There is an urgent need to arrest the loss of water in the system, both as a cost-saving measure and a way of improving services to the public. WASCO will therefore undertake a pipe replacement project in Castries and from Choc to Cap Estate in the coming financial year. In addition, the desilting of the John Compton Dam will enhance the country's water security. The investment in this project also includes preparing a site to receive the silt from the dam, which is currently underway. The first phase of the Dennery North Water Supply Project was completed in January of this year at a cost of US $6.6 million, of which $5 million was a grant from the government of Mexico. Phase 2, which will include expansion of the water treatment plant and ancillary equipment and the provision of a pipe-borne water to Oleon, will be financed through a combination of loans, grants from the Caribbean Development Bank of US $11.2 million. The spend on phase 2 of this year is $10.9 million. The Vieux Fort North Water Supply Project, will create a safe, efficient, reliable, and climate resilient and sustainable supply of portable water to all the residents of Vieux Fort over the long term. The project comprises the construction of a new intake in the Vieux Fort River, a water treatment plant at Beausaint-Joux, installation of transmission mains from the Beausaint-Joux pumping station to the Beanfield storage tank, the Auger storage tanks, and the Tourney storage tanks. La Tourney, my apologies, thank you. Upgrade of the existing Beanfield transmission main. Installation of the storage tanks at Grace and La Tourney and La Barrie. And institutional strengthening for Wasco upon completion. Upon completion, the system is projected to provide 4.8 million gallons a day. Procurement activities are advancing, and it is anticipated that work should commence within the last quarter of 2018. The allocation for 2018-2019 is 4.8 million. Wasco will also investigate the drilling of arterial wells as an additional source of portable water to ensure water security and build resilience into the system. As more physical development takes place across the island. Area of housing. I turn now to housing, Mr. Speaker, where it is clear that the National Housing Corporation can no longer be the sole provider of startup homes. It is neither efficient nor cost effective for either the government or those seeking this type of housing solution. We will therefore encourage the NHC to partner with private sector to better satisfy the demand for housing. Let me make it clear from the onset that such partnerships may not be limited to startup homes, but will include lower middle income housing as well. There is a clear demand for housing market for this type of dwelling, and we do not want to stifle the growth of this sector by restraining the ability of the NHC to meet the demand. It is our intention to ensure that there is a fair and balanced approach to the future of housing development, and no one should interpret this to mean that we are abandoning the need of some solutions for affordable housing solutions. It is envisioned that the government can contribute to land, and if necessary or desirable, provide housing designs. Developers will be contracted to build, sell, and manage the developments. It is a win-win situation to satisfy the need for first-time home owners and those who cannot afford mid-range homes on the open market. Let me caution that any such developments will be monitored and managed so as to prevent speculation and abuse. One thing is certain, we could no longer do things in the same old ways and expect a different result. The housing construction program for this year will provide units for sale to first-time owners and retrofit the houses of vulnerable residents in Ancillary Village. It will also relocate vulnerable communities in Otsa and Bexa and relocate an informal settlement in Ager-Micoud. $10 million has been allocated to the accomplishment of this in 2018 and 2019. An allocation of $4 million from the revolving loan fund will make just over 400 lots available through the National Sites and Services Program for low-middle income earners in 2018-2019. Agriculture. With the assistance of €10.3 million from the European Union, the Agricultural Transformation Program of the Banana Accompanying Measures, BAM, project commenced in May of 2013 and is expected to conclude during the year 2018-2019. This initiative aims to improve the revenue-generating potential of the rural sector and its contribution to economic growth. The aim is to increase productivity in the agricultural sector through entrepreneurship, innovation, and technology-oriented approaches, agri-enterprise development, and quality standards and certification. The allocation for 2018-2019 for BAM is $3 million. Increasing banana production continues to be a focus of the government's agricultural policy. Mr. Speaker, with the assistance of grants from the Republic of China, Taiwan, and the government of Saint Lucia, the acreage under cultivation stands just over 2,100 acres, with 406 more farmers and their families benefiting from banana cultivation. Food crop security and managing the food import bill will focus on making Saint Lucia self-sufficient in tomatoes, sweet peppers, pineapples, and lettuce. To provide economies of scale and strengthen the viability, The aim is to exceed the demands of the local market and channel the excess into a new food processing industry. This should help alleviate shortages and gluts and provide pricing stability in the fresh produce market. The ultimate goal is to export the manufactured products to the region. Mr. Speaker, as promised last year, the government took a critical look at the operations of the Saint Lucia Marketing Board and the Fish Marketing Corporation, with a view towards determining the viability of both companies. November 2017 marked 50 and 34 years, respectively, of existence of the Saint Lucia Marketing Board and the Saint Lucia Fish Marketing Corporation. Both companies have played their respective roles in the development of the agricultural sector, particularly in the marketing and the distribution of local produce and fisheries. However, the commercial landscape has changed drastically, and both companies have failed to keep up, resulting in mounting debt, continuous losses, and the inability of both companies to effectively and efficiently execute their respective mandates. That being said, the government recognizes the critical role which agriculture continues to play in our economy, principally for creating employment, especially in the rural communities, reducing poverty, generating income, and perhaps most importantly, achieving food security. After several stakeholder consultations with farmer and fisher organizations, private sector entities, and individuals, government is considering the options to consolidate and restructure the two agencies into a single marketing entity. Mr. Speaker, one of the key platforms for improving the fortunes of Saint Lucia, as I reminded the House earlier, is improving the security and justice. One part of government's focus is the regard of physical infrastructure, in which those who administer and enforce justice and the law are required to operate in. For years, our court system has been subjected to inadequate and disconnected physical accommodation. This has a negative effect on all those who are part of the system, whether judges, attorneys, litigants, accused, or police officers. This government is therefore committed to building a new hall of justice. However, Mr. Speaker, we are mindful of the concerns expressed about the previously proposed site, and will be revisiting the issue and inviting further consultation on the selection of a permanent home of the halls of justice. In addition, we are in discussions with financiers to build, operate, lease, and transfer a new police headquarters in Castries and a new police station in Groslay. We also know that new buildings alone cannot solve the problems of crime in Saint Lucia, but our police force is deserving of better facilities, and it's going to get them. Police personnel will also receive training in investigative techniques, which is in conjunction with the continued investment in the reopened forensic lab, should result in a higher rate of crimes resolved. Better policing methods will include community policing that will complement the social development of our young people, in particular. It is time, Mr. Speaker, that as a people we go back to the basics of law and order. We wish to have a safe, well-ordered society. We all have a part to play. We cannot break the traffic laws and expect a reduction in accidents. We cannot then, wherever and whenever we want, we feel without discomforting others. The police will have a mandate to return law and order to the conduct of our daily affairs. No society can be free from discipline and be successful for too long. I am therefore calling on all St. Lucians to please play their part. Mr. Speaker, a new digital radio system will finally be procured for the police force and will incorporate the fire service. This will improve the response times for first responders, as the system has a GPS component which will allow the dispatchers to make informed decisions in real time when responding to accidents and scenes of crime. Mr. Speaker, at this juncture, I wish to extend my personal thanks to the many policemen and firemen who, in the absence of a communication network, have been using their own mobile phones at their own expenses to conduct the business of the state. The new digital radio system will therefore provide tangible benefits to the conditions of services to the personnel of these two departments by the way of a secure, efficient, island-wide radio network with the added bonus of immediate savings to their pockets. Let me emphasize what has been taking place. If a policeman notices a crime taking place, the policeman has to go and call on his cell phone to the headquarters, get through to the dispatch to be able to communicate to somebody. Whereas this new system is that he will be on a radio frequency in which it is heard by all the policemen. So if he is announcing that he is in if he's in apprehension of an individual and he's going down a certain direction, that if there's another policeman in the area, that they can share this information, and it will be in real time. So it is unfair what we've been doing to our policemen and firemen and putting them in harm's way. So I'm very excited that we've made this money available. Mr. Speaker, I ask that the House note the removal of Saint Lucia from the EU blacklist of countries considered as tax havens. As members across both sides of the aisle know, blacklisting is a persistent threat to our financial industry. As we seek to increase and indeed replace revenues lost to ever-increasing global tax regulations, as I mentioned last year, we propose to introduce a new residency program for high-net-worth individuals to take up residency in Saint Lucia. In the main, the program recommends that the classification of domiciled be introduced to the income tax and advocates for a distinction to be made between a domiciled resident and a non-domiciled resident, with the non-domiciled category and subsequent requirements as specifically designed to attract high-net-worth individuals. When the appropriate legislation to enable this program is brought to the House, members will be given an opportunity to undertake and debate the objectives of the program. Mr. Speaker, this will be pursued to complement the ongoing initiatives to the CIP and also the IBC regimes, ensuring for resilience. Mr. Speaker, I have so far identified several areas where building resilience will have a positive effect on the lives of our people, but even with the best will in the world, we could never totally win against Mother Nature. As we have seen many, many times over in our small corner of the planet, that we need most in times of disaster is the ability to quickly finance recovery efforts. The government of Saint Lucia is currently a member of the Caribbean Catastrophic Risk Insurance Facility, or CRIF, that provides parametric insurance products for tropical cyclones, earthquakes, and excess rainfall. It was born out of the devastation vested on our region by Hurricane Ivan in 2004 to date, that Saint Lucia has received over $8 million from relief for adverse weather events. Parametric insurance payouts are based on the intensity of the event and the amount of loss, which is calculated based on the pre-agreed model. This allows for quick dispersal of funds, as there is no ambiguity as to the risk of the loss. While CRIF has been an enormous benefit to Saint Lucia, and indeed to the region, it is not a panacea for disaster risk financing. For this reason, the government is currently in discussions with the World Bank towards a new catastrophic deferred drawdown option, or CAT-DDO, as part of the IDA 18 allocation for Saint Lucia. The CAT-DDO is a contingent credit line that provides immediate liquidity in the aftermath of a natural disaster. Under the CAT-DDO, Saint Lucia can secure immediate access to financing up to US $20 million. The CAT-DDO is triggered after the declaration of a state of emergency due to a natural disaster. Mr. Speaker, there are always many competing claims on government's limited finances. In order to meet the demands of improving education and healthcare, advancing social protection strategies, caring for our aging population, fighting crime, and eradicating poverty, We must be, and indeed we shall be, prudent managers of the public purse. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report to the House that the Supreme Court of the Eastern Caribbean has recognized the sanction order issued by the Supreme Court of the Bahamas, and has, as a consequence, the judicial manager has started the process of making payments to policyholders. To date, over EC $8 million has been paid to 117 policies. It is worthy to note that Saint Lucia policyholders will be paid in full out of the company's insurance fund. With regard to CLECO, some 30 creditors have agreed to receive 65% of the sum owed in full and final settlement amounting to a sum just over EC 11 million. 9 creditors have opted to take 40% or EC 1.3 million of the amount owed now, with the remainder to be received as the company's remaining assets are liquidated. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, we have focused considerable attention on reducing our debt and our debt servicing cost. Our public debt continues to grow as a consequence of deficits from previous budgets, although it has grown at a slower rate of 4.9% over the preceding 3 years. Although it has grown at a slower rate of 4.9% over the preceding 3 years and translates to debt GDP of 68.8%, we need to place our debt on a sustainable path. Mr. Speaker, despite debt dynamics, Saint Lucia continues to enjoy good investor appetite. Accordingly, all bonds were issued in 2017-18 at a lower interest rate than in the past and with longer maturities. Similarly, we obtained our oversubscription of securities on the shorter end of the market. Although these developments are favorable, a diagnostic study undertaken last year relieved a high rollover risk because of over 50% of our portfolio is in short-term instruments and remains vulnerable to an increase in interest rates. So when we talk about debt to GDP of 68% and the prudent level being 60, it nowhere clearly identifies the risk that we have. That when 50% of your debt is short term, it means that you are vulnerable to high interest rates. These findings were in keeping with our medium-term debt strategy assessment. Our approach, therefore, continues to focus on lengthening the maturity profile of our portfolio and reducing cost. This approach will reduce risk and thereby strengthen investor confidence and present opportunities to broaden our investor base. Mr. Speaker, the current structure of our debt places immense pressure on our cash flow. It mandates our immediate attention. A large portion of the EC $3.1 billion debt stock matures in the upcoming year, comprising both of Treasury bills and bonds. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, we continue to set aside monies for the bond sinking fund to secure financing of a maturing instruments. A provision of EC 12 million is made in this year's estimate for this purpose. In keeping with the policy decision to introduce last year, this provision is supported by a dedicated revenue stream. So last year we ended up making a contribution of $9 million to our sinking fund, and it is expected that we're going to put together $12 million towards our sinking fund. Additionally, and in conformity to the international best practices, we will be introducing to Parliament a public debt bill. This legislation will instill discipline in the management of government finances, as also improve the accountability and transparency of our debt administration. Mr. Speaker, all these interventions are needed to strengthen our debt management and place St. Lucia's debt portfolio on a sustainable path by 2030. Mr. Speaker, as we're all aware, every extra cent which goes into the servicing of our debt, particularly interest payments, is a cent lost to the contribution towards better education, healthcare, and infrastructure, just to name a few. We will therefore commit to the fiscal discipline that is required to ensure that prudent debt management is continued. Mr. Speaker, a significant component of government expenditure is wages and salaries. Wages and salaries in 2017 and 2018 are estimated at $480 million, or 35% of the total expenditures. The government understands that in the past, the debate on the issue has typically focused on the size of the public service, and varying viewpoints have been espoused with respect to either reducing the size of the service or the wages paid to the public service. I am of the belief, Mr. Speaker, that these discussions miss a more fundamental point, and that the systems in place to facilitate a more efficient public service have been ignored. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the government is at the stage of exploratory discussions to determine how best to transition St. Lucia into an e-society with the clear goal of transforming the way that government provides services to St. Lucians. The expansion of the e-government platform will result in time and cost benefits both to the government and the average citizen, as well as to business people and investors. Mr. Speaker, having spoken about the economic landscape, I now turn to the fiscal operations of the government. In this regard, my government is cognizant of striking the right balance between increasing expenditure to remedy social ills, and on one hand, raising taxes as a source of revenue to fund that expenditure on the other. It is imperative to note that it is the intention of this government to ensure that revenue generation does not come at the cost of impeding the economic recovery currently underway. The delicate balance referred to requires reforms both to taxation and expenditure, with the aim of being to reduce the need for continued deficit financing over the medium term. I want to stress, Mr. Speaker, that the overarching aim of my government is to enhance the overall efficiencies of expenditures, while also ensuring that capital spending is aligned to building resilience and addressing infrastructural gaps. Further to this efficiency gain, there is a need to manage expenditure levels by seeking ways to reduce the debt servicing burden. Mr. Speaker, in my 2017-2018 budget speech, I announced that the government's intention to raise the excise tax rate on gasoline and diesel from $2.50 a gallon to $4. Given the government's tight fiscal situation, the additional $1.50 was earmarked as a dedicated revenue stream to finance maintenance and upgrade of our road network and related infrastructure such as bridges. This is particularly pressing in the light of the pressures on our existing roads from the continued influx of imported motor vehicles. In 2017, the number of vehicles imported in St. Lucia rose by 25% to 3,952 on the heels of a 40% increase in 2016. In order to provide some level of stability in prices at the pump, the government also simultaneously capped the price at $12.75 on both gasoline and diesel. These policy decisions under the new pricing regime, Mr. Speaker, became effective in July 3rd of 2017. At that time, the international price for crude oil was $47.07 per barrel. Since then, international oil prices have increased steadily to US $64.69 per barrel as of March 28, 2018, which is a 37.4% increase from July 2017. Despite the increase in oil prices, the price of gasoline at the pump has been maintained at the cap of $12.75 from July 3rd, while diesel prices were below the cap up until November 26, 2020, and remained at $12.75 since then. This has meant that the actual excise rate of gasoline has been below the targeted $4 per gallon since July 3rd, 2017. The excise tax rate on diesel, which was $4 up to November of 2000, has since been decreased below the intended $4 per gallon. Since July 3rd, 2017 to the date, excise rates on gasoline and diesel have averaged $3.39 and $3.81 per gallon, respectively. This has meant that we have collected on average an additional 89 cents and $1.32 on the gasoline and diesel respectively, rather than the $1.50 of gasoline that was intended. Mr. Speaker, given the present volatility at the petroleum market, the government will review the price cap periodically over the next year so as to maintain the $1.50 excise tax rate. The shortfall has specifically limited the allocation for road repairs, and it is intention to collect the full $1.50 to accelerate the road maintenance program. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the government has secured a loan of US $50 million from the Republic of China, Taiwan, to invest in road repairs and improvements and the refurbishment of schools. The proceeds from the increase in the fuel tax will therefore be assigned to the repayment of this loan. Again, Mr. Speaker, like the airport tax, it is measurable and productive, and a use of the tax increase for urgently needed near-term investment. Mr. Speaker, I will now highlight the major spending aspects of the financial year. The total budget amounts to $1,487,583,200, representing a 1.8% reduction from the approved estimates of 2017-2018. However, it represents an increase of 8.9% over the preliminary outturn. So of the amount budgeted in 2018-2019, recurrent expenditure accounts for 80.8% and amounts to $1,202,950,300, while capital expenditure accounts for 19.2% and amounts to $284.63 million. The budgeted amount for recurrent expenditure includes $137.05 million for debt principal repayments. I propose to finance the budget in the following manner. Recurrent revenue of $1.1 billion, comprising a tax revenue of $1 billion, 90.9%, non-tax revenue of $100.84 million, or 9.1%. Capital revenue is included the proceeds from the sale of assets, the amounts of $7.72 million, grants in the amount of $69.69 million from the friendly governments and multilateral institutions, including the Republic of China, Taiwan, $22.19 million, Japan International Cooperation Agency, $11.97 million, World Bank, $9.8 million, European Development Fund, $6.72 million, Caribbean Development Bank of $4.66 million, and United Nations Environmental Program, $4.84 million. Government instruments, including bonds of $233.12 million, and other loans of $67.18 million, comprising the Caribbean Development Bank of $25.66 million, International Development Association, IDA, $28.55 million, and the Republic of China, Taiwan, $13.58 million. Mr. Speaker, I wish at this time to provide a brief summary of the allocation of expenditure. The economic sector is poised to receive the largest share of the total expenditure in the amount of $862.3 million, or 58% of the total. This represents an increase of $82.69 million, or 10.8% over the previous financial year. Of the total amount to be spent in the economic sector, the sum of $135.5 million, or 15.17%, is allocated to capital expenditure, while $726.75 million, or 84.3%, represents the share allocated to recurrent expenditure. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Finance will receive the largest share of 60.8% of this amount, totaling $524.64 million. I wish to point out that the 98% of the total expenditure by the Department of Finance is of a recurrent nature, with $415 million budgeted for debt service payments and retiring benefits. The budget expenditure under the Department of Infrastructure is $92.54 million, with $51.22 million dedicated to capital expenditure. In road infrastructure, $14.9 million will go towards bridges and culverts, while $5.23 million will be spent on the disaster recovery program as we continue to repair the damage inflicted by Hurricane Tomas. Mr. Speaker, I propose to allocate to the Department of Economic Development, Transport and Civil Aviation the sum of $71.5 million for the capital expenditure, of which $26.97 million is to be allocated for the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, DVRP. The object of this project is to reduce the vulnerability to natural disasters and climate change. I'm also proposing an allocation of $18.91 million to the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project and $18.6 million for the Constituency Development Project, CDP. As part of the efforts to enhance food security and forge linkages with the tourism industry, our investment in agriculture will continue with a total budgeted expenditure under the Department of Agriculture budgeted at $47.92 million, of which $26.8 million will be capital expenditure. Key investments in agriculture will be $4.3 million under the Banana Productivity Improvement Project and $3.02 million under the Agricultural Transformation Program. In the important area of water, I am pleased to allocate $10.98 million to complete the Dennery Water Supply Redevelopment Project, as well as $4.85 million to commence a similar project in Vieux Fort. Mr. Speaker, I wish to propose capital expenditure of $32.03 million in the Department of Tourism. Of this amount, $26.9 million will go towards tourism marketing to support marketing and airlift to our country. Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention to the social services sector. An allocation of $416.14 million is proposed for this sector, of which $371.86 million is recurrent and $44.28 million is capital. The bulk of the recurrent expenditure in this sector is earmarked for the Department of Education and Health, with the remaining amount going to the Departments of Equity, Labor, Youth Development, and Sports and Local Government. In terms of capital investments, $12.95 million is budgeted for the Department of Equity, of which $6.49 million is for the Home Care Program, while $3.26 million is allocated to the Youth Empowerment for Life Project and $1.98 million to the BNTF 9th Program. Under the Department of Health, the capital expenditure amounts to $7.9 million, which is dedicated to the new National Hospital Infrastructure Works and the commissioning in the amounts of $4.7 million and $2.6 million, respectively. The proposed capital expenditure under the Department of Education is $2.45 million, of which $2 million is for the Saint Lucia Education Quality Improvement Project. To deal with the housing shortage, I propose capital investment in the Department of Housing, Urban Renewal and Telecommunications of $17.9 million. The major initiatives would be the Proud Settlement Upgrade Program, the National Sites and Services Program, and the Housing Construction Program. Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention to the justice sector, to which total expenditure is $138.5 million is allocated. The bulk of this expenditure is of a recurrent nature to support our police, fire, and correctional officers. However, under the Department of Home Affairs, I propose capital expenditures of $2.9 million, of which $2.6 million will be devoted to the digital radio system for the police and fire services. With respect to the general services agencies, I propose a total allocation of $61.46 million, with $24.1 million being allocated to the capital expenditure. Of this amount, $7.59 million is allocated under the Office of the Prime Minister for the National Apprenticeship Program to support a call center and hospitality training. Under the Department of the Public Service, I have budgeted $4.03 million towards a shared services platform to integrate all e-government initiatives, as well as $3.3 million for the reorganization and refurbishment of government offices. I've also allocated $1.4 million for the government island-wide GNet to provide free Wi-Fi at 5 locations across the island. Finally, I wish to propose the total allocation of $9.06 million to the organs of Parliament, which include the Governor General, the Legislature, the Service Commission, and the Electoral and Audit Departments. Mr. Speaker, as mentioned earlier, you will observe that the total proposed expenditure of $1,487,583,200 is a 1.8% lower than the approved estimates last year. This was driven by a 22% reduction in the proposed spending of the capital expenditure that more than offset the 4.5% increase in the proposed recurrent expenditure. But let me also add that some of the recurrent expenditure items, some of the items that were traditionally classified as capital have been moved over to recurrent. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I believe that the focus of the government's strategy for this financial year meets the goals which we set ourselves to take Saint Lucia forward and build resilience in Saint Lucia. This budget touches on all sections of our economy and will benefit all Saint Lucians. This budget has been prepared without introducing any new taxes. I wish to emphasize, there will be no new taxes. The only adjustment to revenue comes from the removal of the cap on fuel, as world oil prices have increased considerably in comparison to prices last year. Mr. Speaker, four major areas have been identified as limiting factors to sustainable growth in Saint Lucia. These have all been addressed by this budget statement and will be the focus of our government for the remaining 3 budget cycles, and these are investing in our people, upgrading our physical infrastructure, improving the public sector efficiency, and managing the cost of debt. Our focus on these areas will lay the foundation for the building of a new resilient Saint Lucia and must be implemented simultaneously to achieve the growth we are desirous of achieving. It is paramount that we understand that underperformance of any one of those 4 pillars can potentially undermine the success of the whole. Mr. Speaker, our government inherited an economy and a country in need of urgent attention towards improved stewardship and greater focus. This has forced our government to make a number of difficult decisions from inception, all of which have been made with the aim of creating a better and more resilient Saint Lucia for all. There are still many tough decisions to be made in the future, and I would ask Saint Lucians to bear patience as our labor and sacrifices will soon begin to bear even more fruit. We're on the right track, but we must stay the course to achieve the success. Our next 3 budget cycles, our government will invest over $1 billion in capital expenditure in order to construct a new and rehabilitate the existing infrastructure. Confirmed public sector projects include the redevelopment of the Honourable International Airport, the road rehabilitation including the West Coast Road and Millennium Highway, construction of the Dennery and Soufriere Polyclinics, the John Compton Dam Rehabilitation Project, Dennery and Vieux-Fort Water Supply Projects, and reconstruction of the bridges in the cul-de-sac, to name a few. We have been able to secure much of the funding for the above projects, though the relentless efforts to source grant and concessional. We've been able to secure much of the funding for the above projects through the relentless efforts to source grant and concessional funding. The remaining funding will come from the revenue sources which have already been identified. Mr. Speaker, the financing of all these projects has been secured, and the political will to develop Saint Lucia is stronger than ever. In addition, we are in advanced stage in finalizing the financing for the construction of the halls of justice, the police headquarters, and the Groslay Police Station. This will mean the creation of more jobs, more opportunities for personal advancement, and a better quality of life for all Saint Lucians. Of all these projects are transformative and will each in some way impact the lives of all of us. In addition to significant public sector investment, we can also expect equally robust program of private sector investment in the coming years. We can look forward to the construction of 6 new resorts within the coming years, with the investments totaling over $700 million. This too will translate into sustainable jobs for our people throughout the island. Mr. Speaker, the recent spate of hurricanes that our region has experienced over the past few years is a stark reminder of the world in which we live in. It is a world that is relentlessly unforgiving and tough. We need to be ready for it. We must become resilient as individuals and as a nation. We must adopt a psyche of a positive attitude and strong work ethic. This is the only way to attain economic development, competitiveness, and social harmony. Mr. Speaker, the policies of my government articulated in this budget will be the platform for achieving the prosperity and the progress as we move towards building a new, resilient St. Lucia. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I must thank all of the people of St. Lucia, from the north in Gros Lake to the southernmost tip of St. Lucia in Vieux Fort. It is the experiences, challenges, and successes of these people which inspire and drive this administration to work towards the betterment of this country. It is again against this background, Mr. Speaker, that I commend these policies for the financial year 2018-2019.
Honourable members, the question is that the Appropriation 2018-2019 bill be read a second time. Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand adjourned until Wednesday, April 4th at 2 p.m.
Honourable members, the question is that this House do stand adjourned until Wednesday, April 4th at 2 p.m. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.
We are happy that we were able to have brought you a live broadcast of the PM's budget address on the Appropriation 2018-2019 bill. Some of the highlights of the PM's address: the PM described the local economy as an economy in recovery. He said investors are showing renewed interest in St. Lucia. The Prime Minister also listed some major achievements by his government over the last fiscal period. Some of them include the comprehensive assessment of the e-government environment, and the Prime Minister said that efforts are afoot to digitize the government records, and also the installation of island-wide internet services. The Prime Minister says that this government will be launching a robust assault on unemployment. He also spoke of the partial reopening of the forensic lab. He said there has been an improvement in the economy. There has been a 2.5% increase for 2017. However, the Prime Minister said there are some impediments to economic growth, and that the government is committed to addressing. The modernization of the teaching and learning along across the public schools is another area of concern for the government of Saint Lucia. He also spoke of the building of a center of excellence for sports and education. On the matter of building social resilience, the Prime Minister also spoke of a review of the child protection services and added that 3 more individuals will join the current staff complement at the Social Services Department. He said we can't expect to see a significant boost in the area of youth and sports, and of course some significant resources will be implemented, and so we should be able to see a significant boost in those areas. The National Health Insurance for All, that has been on the table for a while, and the Prime Minister did indicate that we can expect to see the implementation of that program before the end of the current fiscal year. Noting the rapid rise in technology, the Prime Minister said the government intends to transition St. Lucia into an e-society. So there you have it. Several key areas were touched on by the Prime Minister during the presentation of his address on the appropriation bill. And tomorrow, the NTN will bring you live coverage of day 1 on the debate on the Appropriation 2018-2019 bill. We are happy that our broadcast partners are with us, and we're talking about W Event and also Kyrie FM. So you can join us tomorrow for another broadcast. W Event is on 93.5 and 94.7. Kyrie FM is on 93.1. So we look forward to joining you tomorrow for another broadcast, where the broadcast is scheduled to begin at 2 p.m. Be sure to join us then.